Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. We will starting in 2 minutes. For those who have just joined, we will be starting in 1 minute. I hope our video and audio is good. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's good time to start. So thank you so much for joining us on a Friday evening. Today we have Abhirup and Kusagra with us, right? And today the whole agenda of this call to have no agenda at all. We will taking your all of your questions that you might have regarding BRSR, CDP, EcoVadis, right? From in terms of implementation, in terms of technical understanding or what you might be facing in your day-to-day regular life while implementing these things in your organization, right? So thank you Abhiru, thank you Kusagra for joining today, and thank you everyone. So yeah, we can start having question. So in the bottom of your screen you might find Q&A box, right? That Q&A box, if you click there, you have an option to submit your questions. We can just take those questions and then we will start having conversation on those. Yeah. So yeah, let me just okay. So yes, someone sent us a question. Yeah. So to report CDP, right? So is there any so to report CDP, we are thinking about responding to water and forest question here. How they are both are different and what type of stakeholder do we expect for each of the three areas? So I think the CDP climate, water and forest that you are talking about. So yeah, Abhi, would you like to take this further?
Yeah, I can take it up. So, can you repeat the question, or maybe like just correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Someone has asked this question that for CDP, they were responding to climate and forest, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so, what type of stakeholders do we need to involve for that?
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So, see, for CDP, anything in terms of their forest, climate change, and water questionnaire, now from 2024 onwards, they have anyway merged the questionnaire into a single one where you have to just go and select the topics that are applicable to you, and based on that question selection as well as the option selection in that particular question or a particular table, you get those scorings for individual sections like your climate change, water, and maybe your forest, right? So now coming to the right question, that what type and what kind of stakeholders that we need to involve. I believe you're asking mainly from internal stakeholders viewpoint, that which teams or which department and which function shall we touch upon. So if you look at the entirety of CDP questionnaire, it will be something that is a derived data from your any sustainability report or an ESG report, BRSR report, whatever you may call it, because the data point that are being asked is your carbon emission, like water intensity, water withdrawal, then your plastic related ways that you generated and all of these details, right? So now, sustainability team for sure needs to be involved into this. If your organization has a risk function separately or a chief risk officer, he or she is definitely needed for this, because when you submit the questionnaire, and if I am not wrong, it is like the section C of CDP where we are asked about the risk and opportunities for the companies in these areas, right? That's where, how do you define the risk? Is it a short term, medium term, long term? And again, the quantification of that risk in terms of your revenue, in terms of any opportunity, what is the potential top line, bottom line impact? Those details have to be filled in on for your CDP questionnaire, right? So that's where risk team needs to be involved. Apart from this, it can be also the strategy team, if not a risk team, because certain companies do have a strategy team who looks after all of these things, right? So these two functions for sure needs to be involved. And apart from this, the third most important function would be finance, because like I mentioned, there has to be some sort of modeling being done to come up with a questionnaire or an answer for your 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line impact of these areas, or maybe any opportunities that you are putting in there, right? So that's what these three are the primary functions I would say really needed for CDP questionnaire submission, irrespective of, let's say, the questions that you're selecting on climate, forest, or maybe plastic that we are looking for. Russell, we can't hear you.
So I'm sorry. So thank you so much, Avirup. We just got another question from Janmesh. Can the system track scope 1, 2, and 3 emission in line with CDP requirement? If yes, how does it, especially for scope 2 and 3?
Okay, yeah. So Janmish, the question that you asked is that uh, can the system track scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions in line with the CDP requirement? So just to clarify, CDP's requirement is nothing unique or nothing different from any global requirements, because CDP is also following the same methodology that GHG protocol defines in terms of the accounting, and then for the accounting purpose, the emission factors that you are using are also depends on the geography of your operations, as well as the type of fuels that you use, right? So, like any requirement that you see in CDP, it's not unique. It's the same requirement that you would be finding in, let's say, an ISO certification or a third-party certification or any other certification that you want to go for. So yeah, in that sense, any thing that you want to track for your carbon emission, it is aligned to the CDP requirement itself in terms of your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Now, I just wanted to emphasize on the scope 3 part of it, because scope 3 has these 15 categories, right, which are again broken down into upstream and downstream, right? Now, in upstream and downstream emissions, out of those 15 categories, first thing that we need to identify or address is that is all like, are all the categories applicable to your organization or not, right? And it depends based on how you have defined your operational boundary or like the scope boundary for your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Based on that, again, certain things might or might not be applicable in your scope 3 categories. So step 1 is to define that which categories out of scope 3 is applicable to you. Now, for those applicable categories also, there are certain methodologies that you can use. It can be a very easy process where you just do a spend-based calculation for scope 3. In CDP, that is also allowed, right? Or you can go to a vendor-specific method where you get the data of the emission factors for all your purchases, goods, services, from your vendors. Again, like that, those things are applicable to certain categories only, like your purchase goods and services, capital goods, and all. But for certain categories like your uh, WTT, like waste related emissions or emissions from transportation of fuels, those are anyway the derived entities, because the data will be there with you for your operational waste, which is going to the landfill, or maybe the fuels that you are using and consuming for your scope 1 calculations. So from there, you can also derive few scope 3 categories. And few categories would be very much specific to only internal data, like your employee commute, business travel. Those details are anyway going to be coming from either your admin, HR, travel team, right? Or else it can be sourced from any third party who is looking after your travel bookings for your company or anything like that, right? So that's why like scope 3 emissions depends on, first of all, applicability of the categories for your organization. Second thing is that the methodology that you are choosing. And based on that, the total scope 3 calculations gets covered for your CDP reporting or any other reporting. And to like just give you a view, if you are talking about, let's say, a system where like Oren's platform comes into picture, we do provide this functionality to cover up your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, which aligns to a global requirement along with the CDP requirements as well. And it also facilitates this different methodologies that you can deploy to calculate your scope 3 emissions.
Great. I hope Janmesh got their answer. We also got another question from Devesh. So they are asking if there's a way I can find company's old CDP report like 2022 or 2021 year.
Yeah, so it is only possible if you are a registered user on CDP, right? So in that case, if you have a registration on CDP, the login details that you have, right, like your myportal.cdp .com, that detail, right? There, what you can do, go to your company's like page. There you have a link of looking into the previous year's data or previous year's report. So till 2023, you will have access to all the companies who have publicly disclosed their CDP questionnaire. So you can find out the list, and then based on the list, whichever company you find relevant for you, you can definitely look into it. From 2024 onwards, if you want to get access to any report of any other company other than your company, in that case, it is a paid service that you have to avail from CDP, and then you have to reach out to your SPOC from CDP. You will definitely get it on their the portal details itself with the email ID and the details of the details of the CDP account manager. To that account manager, you have to share that these are the companies where we need the details for, let's say, 2024 submission, and they will then extract and give it to you based on your subscription.
Great. I think Devesh also asked a follow-up question regarding that question only. Can one company login ID can give access to other companies' report?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like a login that you have will give you access to other companies' report, only limited to 2023 submissions. So anything before 2023, any CDP submission where any organization who was reporting on CDP made their reports public, for them, you can access it with just your CDP login. But before, like any login that you have, and if you want to access 2024 and 2025 reports, for that, it is going to be a paid service.
Great, great. Thank you, Abhinav, and thank you, Devesh, for asking that question. Okay, one more question is from Snehalata, right? A key ambition of BRSI is to drive change deep into supply chain, right? How can large listed companies effectively engage and upskill their often small scale, smaller MSME suppliers, right? And who may see this as a bureaucratic burden rather than a value add? Very interesting question, Abhinav.
Okay, so to answer this question, see, like right now, there is not a single, I would say, silver bullet which can solve this entire equation, because see, like the major difference in terms of the thought process for an MSME or let's say a larger listed company is that nobody is ready to like an SME is much more cost sensitive compared to let's say a listed company. That is what is the basic difference, right? Now, when you factor in a risk to your revenue into this entire equation, everything becomes much more visible to you, anyone looking at these as a cost, right? So that's why like this is more of a mindset shift that has to happen, because in a listed company or a larger company, I would say, for the sake of simplicity, let's say a large enterprise, they have systems and processes in place which makes them follow certain things in a way, like because the processes are meant to be much more agnostic to the people who are responsible for doing it. Whereas in MSMEs, the typical behavior is that it will be much more people centric rather than a process centric organization, right? And that's where the moment you move from a people centric to a process centric organization, all of these risk factors comes into picture, and that will give you a much larger view into this and a better adoption of it, right? Now in this question, right, how we can engage the MSMEs and how we can upskill them to kind of get into at least that position that they should be able to address all of these questions, right? So I would say this is already happening. Like there are so many MSMEs who are anyway part of the value chain for multiple companies who are listed today, and also the global supply chain. So the only problem, like today, when we interact with MSMEs, right, the question that they ask us is that we have got, let's say, 10 questions, 20 questions from our different clients, but help us understand this questionnaire and like how we can have a single process which can answer all these questions. So their challenge is not about understanding or maybe even taking an effort to make sure that, yeah, these things we want to improve ourselves in terms of understanding as well as reporting this activity. So I would say that transparency is not the challenge, or the intention to upskill is not the challenge. The problem is so much of confusion and cloud around this ESG sustainability, and because every company is asking the data points in their format, that's where it becomes much more burdensome for them. That like, what shall I do? To be clear, see, for an MSME, having a separate or an individual resource who is only responsible for answering these questions from the client, right? That is a burden for them, because it's not a full-time 24 into 7 job or maybe a 365 days job for an individual. And that's where the hindrance comes into picture. It's not that they are not willing to do it, they are not intending to do it. If it can be made easier through some kind of a like templated format. Like today, when we talk about India as a geography, BRSR core is a framework that like automatically gets applied to all the as MSMEs, right? Because of a listed company's obligation requirement of the supply chain. So if a company is only told to comply with, let's say, a BRSR core questionnaire, I'm sure like in a year or two, all the MSMEs will adopt it, and they would definitely get that understanding of how to do a carbon accounting, how to do, let's say, your energy, water footprint, and all of these questions which are there in BRSR core. The moment they get bombarded with multiple questionnaire from different clients and they have some or the other variation or flavor of the same question, but at the same time some additional requirements, that is when it becomes much more difficult for them to adopt, because they don't have a right person or let's say a uh, dedicated person looking after it. So this is what my take is of this equation, and I'm sure like in a couple of years this thing is going to get ironed out. MSMEs would be also prepared with those requirements and these kind of like I would say capabilities.
Right. You also touch a very important aspect. It's like BRSR code, right? So I
Mhm.
think if you could just explain or highlight few points, right? Which companies are falling under this BRSR code directly, and for which companies this is more can be a like a leadership indicator, right? To go forward with it. So yeah.
See, BRSR core, like from an applicability viewpoint, BRSR is a larger format of sustainability reporting that SEBI has prescribed, right? BRSR core is nothing but basically a trimmed down version or a 9 question cutout from BRSR. So that is what is BRSR. It's not a separate format. It's the same format that we have been reporting from the last few years. If it's a listed company, right now in BRSR core, the requirement is that for any listed company for whom assurance on the sustainability report or assessment of the sustainability report is mandated as per the glide path that SEBI has recommended, for them this BRSR core becomes much more mandatory because the assessment or the assurance has to be done for those 9 questions which are in BRSR core, right? So that's why BRSR core applicability as of today for FY 25-26, it will be a mandatory requirement for the top 500 companies. As per the market cap, the list that got released, like the latest list is there in maybe December 31st, 2024, right? So as per that list, if your organization is in the top 500, then in that case for FY 25-26, your company have to do a BRSR core disclosure and also get an assessment certificate or an assurance certificate from a third party for that BRSR core details. So that is the applicability today. One more tangent over here is that from the supply chain engagement, which we were talking earlier, right? So there is also a link of BRSR core into that. Now, for the same top 1,000 listed companies who are already reporting on BRSR, there is a secondary glide path that SEBI has recommended. On that glide path, for the top 250 listed companies, again on the same format, for them in FY 25-26, the supply chain or value chain engagement is also a mandatory requirement. So from a mandatory requirement viewpoint, for the top 500 companies, BRSR core for their own reporting is mandatory. And for those top 250 companies, it's the BRSR core as well as getting the BRSR core data from their value chain partners is also a mandatory requirement. Now, like, is it 100% of the value chain partners? Absolutely no. It is primarily saying based on the total revenue of the company and the total purchase or total spend of the company, you have to filter out which vendors or which partners contribute to more than 2% of your revenue or maybe contribute to 2% of your total spend, right? So those list of vendors are mandatorily required to be covered under your BRSR core value chain disclosure. But like, again, there is no limit in terms of the number of vendors or the percentage of the vendors that you want to cover. So you can definitely go beyond 2%, go up to 70%, 75%, 80%, whatever it may be. So that is like, I would say, voluntary today. But any company, any organization, any vendor supplier who is contributing to more than 2% of your total spend or purchases, for them, again, the BRSR core data has to be collected, collated, and then reported along with your BRSR and BRSR core. So that is what is the requirement for the top 250 companies in this FY 25-26.
Great. Thank you, Abiru. So I think we also got a question from Joseph that Sagar already answered in the Q&A box. Sagar, do you want to add anything else on top of that?
No, yeah, so I think EcoVadis is actually much more holistic and much more, I would say, expansive version of TDP. So TDP primarily focus on the environment aspects along with your strategy and governance around environmental aspects, whereas EcoVadis goes right from not just environment but social and governance aspects also. So you have your uh, employee trainings, employee diversity, employee inclusion, anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, corruption and bribery, anti-money laundering. It requires EcoVadis asks you to upload your policies, upload any actions that you have taken. It asks you to enter actual numbers that you have done. What is your actual gender diversity in your employees, in your board, the percent of employees that are covered under various state templates. So, but EcoVadis actually asks for a much more, again, like I said, comprehensive and exhaustive list of KPIs on both on all environment, social as well as governance aspects, along with your value chain. So, supplier audits, grievance mechanism for suppliers, your supplier code of conduct, your supplier contract should have environment and social clauses in your contracts, right? So it's a much more exhaustive, much more comprehensive, and much more holistic as compared to CDP. That's what I would say. The relation between the two is only primarily on the environmental aspects, but apart from that, EcoVadis is definitely much more detailed.
Yeah, great. I believe Joseph get his answer. Adding to that, we also got a question regarding EcoVadis again, right? So Achilles is asking if they are doing the first time EcoVadis assessment. Any practical tip or strategies for gathering all the right document or proof points to help them with that assessment? Abhirup or Kusagra, anyone would like to take this question?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. So we are planning to do our first EcoVadis assessment. Any practical tip or strategies for gathering all the right document and proof points?
See, again, like right question. So to answer your question to a pinpoint accuracy, like the first of all, you have to get the EcoVadis questionnaire, and the EcoVadis questionnaire itself defines that exactly what kind of documents are allowed to be uploaded for that, right? But if I have to give you a generalistic answer, like if I break down the type of documents needed for EcoVadis, it will be divided into, let's say, four types of documents primarily. First set of documents would be policies, right? So there is a long list of policies that are required for EcoVadis, and there is a specific need that they have on each and every policy, that certain keywords should be mentioned. There should be obviously some targets and goals. There should be a review mechanism mentioned. There should be a validity mentioned on the policies, or maybe a reviews or revision cycle mentioned over there. So there are some basic hygiene related requirements that are there in each and every document. There are also certain type of data or type of detailing required in these kind of policies. So that is, I would say, the first set of documents that you need to be prepared with. And again, like which policies are applicable and which policies are required for your organization, you will definitely get it in the questionnaire itself, right? Now, second set of documents would be any document which covers data points and measures indicators in your EcoVadis questionnaire. What it essentially means is that EcoVadis is also asking you the similar data points like your scope 1, scope 2 emissions or scope 3 emissions, then your, let's say, number of injuries in your organization, number of fatalities that has happened, number of trainings that you have done for your employees on certain topics and all, right? So all of these details are to be submitted on to the EcoVadis portal. You can do it individually as, let's say, topic wise, or let's say a question wise, right? Or it can be consolidated together into a sustainability report, and the report can be submitted to the EcoVadis for their reference, right? So like a sustainability report, if you are, let's say, aligning it with the GRI framework, definitely it covers 70 to 90% of the requirements that you get on EcoVadis in terms of their data or disclosures or maybe endorsement and coverage. So these are the three sections where you need these kind of details to be submitted, right? Third set of documentation that would be needed for your EcoVadis would be also procedures or like SOPs for certain things like your bribery and corruption. How are you assessing that, right? What is the SOP that you have created? Similarly, for human rights or child labor violations, what is the SOP? So there are certain types of SOPs being asked on EcoVadis that you have to upload as a evidence proof over there. And fourth would be the set of certifications that you have, right? Let's say like you have an ISO 9001 or 14001 certification. So in that case, you have to upload that certificates on the portal that, yeah, I do have the certificate, which is a valid certificate till so and so date, right? So these are the primary, like broad level types of documents that are needed for EcoVadis. Now, which document is applicable and which is not applicable to you, that would be defined based on the questionnaire that you get. And again, like the questionnaire gets defined based on the size and the industry of your organization, right? So that's where there is a bit of subjectivity that what will be applicable the moment you have the questionnaire along with you, you will definitely get that. Now, in the sustainability report itself, you should be able to cover most of the things there. If not that, like if you don't have a sustainability report as an attachment, in that case, you have to go for, let's say, like human rights as a topic. On that, like you can have a separate policy as an attachment. Along with that, you can say that for human rights, this is the committee that we have who looked after it. This is our goal and target. This is what we do as our assessment process. And then we have done this much training, which covers these many employees for us. And you have to have attachments of your, let's say, attendance register for that training, the training material itself, and all of these things can be a single document which can be on your letterhead, signed and stamped by you, and that also is a valid document for EcoVadis submission. So it's up to you, how do you want to submit it. It can be topic wise, as I mentioned, like in the later part, or it can be considered into a sustainability report which covers all your data points requirements in a single document itself.
Thank you, Abhirup. Parul also have a question, right? Are the parameters of BRSR and EcoVadis similar, or any difference is there?
So see, when we talk about parameters, again, like I mentioned, globally, the terminologies or maybe like the methodologies for anything related to sustainability or ESG metrics are same, right? It is just the flavor that changes, or maybe the type of the questionnaire changes, right? Like in BRSR, it is much more templated towards Indian geography and Indian requirement, right? Whereas GRI is a much more global and much more sector agnostic framework, right? Um, so now, when we talk about EcoVadis and BRSR as a difference, see, there are two difference out of it. EcoVadis is mainly a rating agency or an assessment agency. So EcoVadis is asking you for some certain details. Based on the submission that you have, you are going to get rated on your ESG maturity or sustainability maturity. So that is what their purpose is. Now, for the BRSR purpose is not a rating. BRSR is not meant for your rating. BRSR is meant for transparency, that you as an organization is reporting on certain parameters, which is publicly available for anyone to make use of that data. So that's where BRSR is much more broader. BRSR doesn't have any limit saying that, yeah, if you don't have, let's say, a carbon emission reduction target, in that case, there will be, they will not assign you a mark or they will not get the score. Whereas the same thing is applicable in EcoVadis. If you don't have a, let's say, goal and target, in that case, they will give you a lesser marking or lesser scoring, right? So that's where the application of the same question differs in terms of an EcoVadis or in terms of a BRSR, but more or less things are going to be same.
Understood. So Janmesh also sent one more question. For compliance and framework, how built-in controls exist to ensure data accuracy and completeness for disclosures?
Okay, for compliance and framework, how built-in controls exist to ensure data accuracy and completeness for disclosures. When we say built-in controls, are we talking about, I assume that we are talking about mainly our internal processes as our built-in controls, right? So now see, like every accuracy, like the accuracy of your data depends on how you are monitoring or recording that data, right? In case of a manual monitoring, where let's say, like I'll take two examples. One example is an electricity consumption. Like just take an example where there are two scenarios possible. If you, let's say, collect electricity consumption data from one of your plants or branch office, right? There are two ways to collect it. First way is you directly get that data from a real-time smart meter that is placed over there, which is giving you a real-time data at any given point of time, right? So in this case, what is happening, the data is directly getting relayed from that particular meter to you or anyone in the organization, right? So there is zero manual input in this process, and that's where I would say it's 100% accurate data that you are going to get out of it. If not 100%, it will be 99.9% based on whatever accuracy that the meter would have, right? Now, in a second case scenario where you are going to collect that data uh, based on the invoice or bill that you get for that particular month or particular fortnight, whatever is the frequency for your electricity bill, right? In this case scenario, the bill that got generated is the final proof that you have as per the consumption, right? Now, if you directly get that data from that bill through, let's say, someone in the plant who is typing that number as well as an unit in an Excel sheet, sending it to you through an email, and then you using that data into a consolidated sheet where you do your calculations and all, right? So in that case, there are again like a manual intervention happening in this process. In this process itself, there are so many um, errors that can happen, right? Like if a person has missed a point or decimal point into that number, that can give you error. If he or she has not selected the right unit, that can give an error. The moment they send an email, again, like if you have not referred to the updated email, or maybe like if there any versions are there in terms of the number that they have reported, that can be an error. The moment you copy that data from there to a consolidated sheet can also result to an error, right? So there are multiple error points in terms of a manual intervention happening there. If all of these things are being checked, if you have an built-in internal control where you, like the final data is also getting cross-checked with the final invoice that you have, in that case, this built-in control can definitely make sure that, yeah, the data accuracy is maintained. If you don't have that mechanism, that even if in a manual process, the final data that you're getting used in a consolidated level is also real checked with the attachment or maybe a supporting document. In that case, again, like the internal controls are not effective.
Thank you, Abiru. I think we can move to next question. So Sayan asking, is EcoVadis conducted during the gathering of data for integrated management system, like combination of ISO 9001, 14001, and 45001? What type of online data is gathered for integrated management system?
Just I'm trying to understand the question itself. Like,
Okay.
is EcoVadis conducted during the gathering of data for integrated management systems like this? What type of offline and online data is gathered for integrated management system? See, this Sign, correct me if I'm wrong. Like the question that you have asked is that is EcoVadis um, EcoVadis is not conducted during the data gathering phase. EcoVadis is anyway like a final certification process after you have completed all your data collection process. That is, like I would say, the step one. Now, for let's say a integrated management system which covers your 9001, 14001, 45001, right? These certifications for your IMS system is going to give you leverage on EcoVadis. EcoVadis is asking that, yeah, like, do you have a process to monitor, let's say, your environmental management system, your health and safety management system, quality management system? That's where you can say, yeah, we do have a system in place, which is an IMS system, and this is where we have got the certification for that, right? So that is the only thing that gets covered in EcoVadis. EcoVadis is not meant to assess that how effective is your management system. It is mainly meant to understand where are you in terms of your maturity on sustainability. When you talk about maturity on sustainability, it is nothing but basically, are you covering or are you monitoring your business risks? And if you are monitoring, in that case, are you able to also mitigate any risks that you foresee in the next near future? So these are the few things that they are looking at. Now, how effective is your organization in terms of your risk monitoring and risk mitigation? That is the purpose of your EcoVadis rating or EcoVadis certification. In your IMSs are basically part of this process, like how you monitor and how you mitigate your risk. That is getting certified in your IMS system. Now, your second question was that what type of offline and online data is gathered from integrated management system? See, offline and online data, again, like, it depends on the company's process and the type of systems that you have. It can be offline and online, right? The type of data that would be needed, primarily, as I mentioned, it will cut across topics which are going to be a risk for the company. And that's where for EcoVadis, particularly, the risks are being defined by EcoVadis. You can definitely look into their definition of risk, which differs from industry to industry, as well as the size of the company, right? So they have a elaborative list that if, let's say, your company is in the automotive sector and your size of the company is, let's say, extra small, small, large, medium, based on that the risk profile changes. And that's where they say that if your risk profile is high for this particular area, in that case, we want to know how you are looking into this, how you are managing this risk, how you are monitoring this risk. So again, like, it depends on the industry and the size of the company, that what data is required and what data is to be reported on EcoVadis.
I hope Sayan got his answer. Thank you, Abhirup. And we have a long question from Mr. Reddy. So, could you please explain how the EcoVadis scoring methodology differentiate between high, medium, and low score across the four assessment team, that is our environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement? Especially, how are scores marked in each section based on the strength of policies, implementation of action, and quality of reporting?
Okay, so the question is that how EcoVadis scoring methodology uh, differentiates between high, low, and medium uh, scoring, right? It's not the weightage of it. So scoring wise, see, like, they have so EcoVadis, first of all, the scoring methodology changes every year, right? So every year at the time of, let's say, January, at the start of the year, they release that for this year itself, what would be the scoring methodology that they would adopt. So like in January 2025, they release that for 2025, what will be the scoring methodology that they have, right? So every year, first of all, the EcoVadis rating and scoring methodology changes. Now the changes are not drastic changes. It are minor tweakings or upgradation changes based on globally what's happening. That is what they communicate every year, right? Now, how they define what is like, if you have got a high score, medium score, or low score in any of the themes or pillars that they have, like your environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement, right? So it all depends on the question. So for, like, if you have already seen the EcoVadis questionnaire, right? In each and every question, they give you an indication that this question is for, let's say, environment section. In that environment section, this question is particularly talking about policies, talking about, let's say, coverage, talking about your measures, talking about your disclosures, right? So they would have each and every question defined for those areas of assessment, right? Now, let's take an example over here that if we are talking about policy, environmental policy, the question would ask that do you have an environmental policy for these certain topics, whichever topics that you select, they will ask you to attach a document. So like, let's say energy. If you select energy, and you attach a policy on that, so what would be their scoring mechanism? They would see that, yeah, do you have this policy signed by, let's say, your top management? Yes. If you have this in your letterhead and signed and stamped, yes, then that is accepted. So this is basically an acceptance criteria from a document viewpoint, right? Then you have a review mechanism being mentioned, the scope of the policy being mentioned. That essentially gives you a low score. Like, I'm just taking an example that, yeah, like if you have, let's say, review mechanism mentioned, what is the revision that you are on, like there is also like scope of the document which will cover multiple stakeholders being mentioned, that would entail for, let's say, at least a low score which is accepted by EcoVadis. Now for moving to, let's say, a medium scoring, like a 20, so they have scoring 25, 50, 75 and 100. That is the scoring methodology that they have. So this bare minimum requirement will give you a 25. Now if you have to move to 50, you would have to align this policy with a global requirement. So like for energy, if you are, let's say, aligning it as per the requirement of your ISO 14001, right? Or maybe any kind of local government requirements, or let's say a PAT scheme that is applicable to you. So referencing this policy with internationally accepted frameworks or certifications, that would give you an additional point into it, right? Now, moving beyond 50 would need, you have to mention certain things which are going to be specific requirements in terms of the measures that your company is taking. So like for energy, it would be a commitment statement from you that we as an organization are committed to switch towards renewable energy. We as an organization are committed to like improve our energy efficiency. Certain such keywords are required for your policy to be getting a higher score, right? And now, if you want to go for, let's say, 100% or a high score for the same policy, right? You have to also mention that, yeah, like we do have an intention or a commitment to go to switch to renewable power, and our target is to have 100% solar or 100% renewable energy by certain time period, or let's say, like an example of 2030, right? So the moment you have a target, your alignment with the international standard, the document is signed and stamped, is well documented, where scopes and definitions are there, as well as your like your commitment and everything is there. That essentially means you are meeting all the requirements that EcoVadis has from a policy on environment, which is talking about energy. So that would give you a 100 score on just that selection. Now, if you select water, the same thing applies. For water, you have to define that we are committed to, let's say, water neutrality. We have a target to be water neutral by so and so year, referencing it to the like international frameworks. Then again, like the same has to be on your letterhead, signed by someone, scope, and all of these definitions are there. So whichever selection that you have, on each and every document, these are the fine linings that are there. And again, like in EcoVadis itself, they have disclosed that when and where you get the scores, what are the eligibility criterias, what are the scoring criterias, and based on that, you will definitely find out that what makes this document getting a 50 to 75 or a 100 score out of the 100 that you can get.
Thank you, Avirup. I hope Mr. Adik get his answer. So we also get a question from Abhinav, right? He's asking, our company is planning to go for BRSR assurance from next financial year. Can a consulting company do that assurance for us?
If there is a consulting company, so question is that from next year onwards, if the company has to go for an BRSR assurance, can a consulting company get that assurance done?
Yeah.
Right. So to answer that, there is only one clause that there are two clauses. First thing first is that an assurance provider has to be a competent party, and that's where you need to have a person in that organization who is competent enough to certify, assure, or assess the disclosure in BRSR. So that is the first criteria. Second criteria is that there should not be any conflict of interest between the parties who are certifying for the company, right? So if, let's say, example, the company is assisting you or consulting in you or your organization towards the BRSR preparation itself, right? So in that case, it becomes a conflict of interest automatically, because a consulting partner who is helping you prepare the document can't be a certifying partner. There has to be a separation on that. If the company is, let's say, just a technology provider where they are providing you just a software solution, and that software solution is being used by your organization to record and monitor data in that, and they also have an assurance service in place, in that case that company can do it because there is no conflict of interest. So the conflict of interest depends on the type of services that you are availing from that company. And again, like if that company is in a consulting company but then you are not availing their consulting services, in that case definitely they can give you a assurance for your BRSR.
Thank you, Viru. Okay, so next question. So Sayan again write one more interesting question. So currently the BIS are planning to move from assurance to assessment. What can change in that scenario? So if asking, so what will be the new change in terms of regulation here?
So, Sain, to just uh, correct you over here, SEBI has already moved to assessment. It's not planning to move from FY 25 itself, FY 24-25 itself. They have made the change. Any company who was obliged to go for an BRSR assurance, they now had that option. They were given that option to go for an assessment rather than an assurance, right? So the basic difference between an assessment and assurance, again, like there is no clear guideline over there by SEBI that what is the difference between assurance and assessment. But now assessment has to be done as per the industry standard industry standards forum standard that they have released, right? So that is the only communication that has been given by SEBI. But if I have to summarize what is the difference between an assessment and an assurance can be a limited assurance or a reasonable assurance that is globally accepted, right? In case of a limited assurance, the data points that are being assessed by a third party is limited to, let's say, 25% or maybe up to 50% of your coverage. Whereas in a reasonable assurance, the data points that are being assessed or assured by a third party would be somewhere around 75 to 100% of the data points, right? So that is the difference between a reasonable and a limited assurance. Now, if you look at assessments also, the only thing that changes is that the framework or the standard they are referring to. So in a reasonable or a limited assurance for any systemic report, any global standards like your A1000 can be used for assurance, but for an assessment, because SEBI has made it clear that it has to follow the industry standards forums assessment criteria. In that case, the assessment can only be followed through based on that standard. So that is the only basic difference. But then again, coverage remains the same, around 25% to 100% based on the type of assessment that the company is going for.
Thank you, Viru. Yeah, so we are also reaching to the end of this webinar. If I hope we able to provide all the answer. So many good, interesting questions for this webinar we received. So before ending the this webinar, right? We also like to announce one more interesting thing that we are planning, right? So we are launching our ESG clinic from next week, but for all the people participating this doing this webinar will get a exclusive early access to it. So yeah, so do let us know, do you have, if anyone have any question, can put in the comments, and I will be sharing the QR code and the link to the ESG clinic. There you can go and register if you have any uh, question that you want to understand with our ESG expert. So you can book a time slot, right? And then once it confirmed, where you can have a 30-minute free session with our ESG expert during this weekend. So yeah, I hope, yeah, let me just share my screen. Yeah. So you can just scan this QR code or log into this website and register yourself. This ESC clinic will be of 30 minutes, right? Where you can have one-to-one conversation with our ESC experts regarding any topic that you like to discuss, be it that you might be planning in your organization, or any difficulty, problem, or inquiry that you like to have. Feel free to write it down, and yeah. Uh, Thank you. First of all, thank you, Abhirup. Thank you, Kusagra, for joining to this webinar. We learned a lot from both of you. Thank you, Kusagra, to taking care of the back-end questions. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
weekend.
So you guys also receive this video recording and the PPT through emails. Yeah. So don't worry. I will send this link to you.
Okay.
Have a nice day, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.